Last week I had made a video about 10 commanders that are fairly affordable that you can build a deck around and have a whole bunch of fun, but one of those picks on that list was not like the other, and that was Niko. But before I dive into that, if you clicked this video because of the thumbnail that told you not to eat this card, I shouldn't have to tell you that. Don't eat any cardboard, but that advice is still fit. Don't eat this card either. Just don't eat cards, okay? Back on topic. I was putting together that list. I was trying to give a whole bunch of suggestions that would be fun for both Bracket 2 and Bracket 3 decks. I really didn't see the potential initially when I went into that video, as I hadn't yet made my Niko deck. However, during the editing process, I became consumed by a mighty need to make a Niko deck, and I did it, and it's on screen now. Please ignore the few cards that shouldn't be there and are there just because I like the bling. They're $15 of the $60-ish deck. Despite my silliness and a few cards that really shouldn't be here, this deck is too effective. I really thought that I was going to be playing into Bracket 2s, and I myself became a bit of a Commander Kyle because I thought the power level of this deck was around a 2, and I played into 2s, but I don't think that's a good idea. A table for this deck should be a 3 minimum because I don't think there's a single precon that is ready for you to make 10 freaking swallowers all at once. I mean, Fleet Swallower, get your mind out of the gutter. The on-combat proc of that many I can't keep saying swallow. With this blue card with the very funny name goes off. If it happens 10 times, you will mill someone to death as it says rounded up. And that is by far one of the lesser evil things that I've done to remove someone from the game using this deck. Think about how powerful it is when you have Hero of the Blade Hold, but there's 10 of them firing at the same time. As a man trying to sell you Flexia would say, that is a lot of damage. In case you were unaware, for 2 mana, you can tap Niko and turn whatever shards they've made so far into a copy of a creature that you're going to exile. Those shards remain as copies of that creature until the end of turn when that exile fades and your creature returns to the battlefield. Shards themselves will not activate ETBs because they are not entering the battlefield, however the original copy will, so you can get a little bit of value off of blinking a creature with an ETB that's also super powerful if you want to. But this deck really flies off the hinges when you start pairing it with blink spells like Splash Portal, as every time you blink Niko, their ETB will trigger, making another couple of shards that you are later going to exploit towards your advantage. And that advantage comes in multiple flavors. Like one of those is getting a whole bunch of mana if you just so happen to have the right mirror in hand. You can just go ahead and turn your shards into mirrors, tap them for mana, and then have a huge advantage. You do have to watch out for summoning sickness as your shards have to stick around for a turn before they're able to, do that non-summoning sickness thing when you turn them into something. Let's say you need to get some card draw because you don't have a good win condition in your hand. Options include, but are not limited to, putting down your Dowerport Mage, having Niko bounce it into exile and making a whole bunch of copies of it, as then you blink Niko themselves. Each of those copies will see Niko get blinked and then give you card draw. It's just so efficient. Now it is important to note that Niko's ability does only work on non-legendary creatures, so you do have to get a little bit creative, but that's also kind of a boon. Firstly, it's a boon because on your budget side, non-legendary creatures just tend to be cheaper, which is due to jerks like me who love building commander decks and only can use legendary creatures for that big old commander slot. And secondly, it allows you to experiment with cards that don't get to see a lot of play, and I think that's just wonderful. Finding a practical use for a card that is underplayed like Empyrean Eagle makes me feel really good at the game, even though I know I'm not. Because by itself, this card is about as non-intimidating as it could possibly be, but when there are a dozen of them, then you start to wonder if he's going to kill you in one turn. But there are 2 other things that set this deck apart from so many other 2s and guarantee that this is a 3, and the first of those 2 is the fact that this deck is defensive by nature. Blink spells are notoriously useful for dodging enemy attacks or spells. If something's going to happen, just exile it for a second instead. Let the spell fizzle and then your character comes back unharmed. You want to blink Niko anyway, so not only are you going to be dodging some threats, you're going to be making more of your win condition. And while that's kind of obvious, this next piece is kind of psychological, and this is what I did not realize when I first made the deck, and that's the fact that people cannot threat assess this commander properly. I have played this deck into a baker dozen of tables at this point, and I can tell you only one person at one of these tables realized exactly how scary that was before it went nuclear. A player who was totally justified in doing this targeted my Niko with a removal effect. I then did a blink effect, and then they used another removal effect on Niko. This player had realized how dangerous the shards were and were justified in targeting me. However, the other 2 players didn't agree and thought he board wiped me for no reason, leading the other 2 players to gang up on him, weakening him as a threat and allowing me 2 turns later to get this boy on the field. While I did deck myself out because I didn't realize how many cards that I would have to draw by having 14 of them on the board, I did get to take 2 people down with me, and that was such a great conclusion that I cannot stop playing this deck. Now, at bracket 3 tables. I did learn very quickly to stop playing this at bracket 2 tables because it is just too powerful, but boy, while you should not build this for bracket 2, definitely consider it for bracket 3. It's healthy, it's on a budget, it's easy to pilot, it's fun, it's flashy. It's super easy to put pet cards into this deck because having a bunch of pet cards is typically really good, even if they kind of, are shitty by themselves. But let's get down to the brass tacks. If you were to build this godforsaken evil deck, how would you do so? Well, obviously you're going to start with Niko and an absolute shit ton of blink spells. I believe for the most part, both of those are fairly cheap to do. Then you have to decide what flavor of evil you want to be. Do you want to be the kind of person who does a bunch of attack triggers that buff your attack, or do you want to do something a little more silly? I personally like having a little bit of manifestation in the deck because while I'm running a bunch of blinks, why not try to double dip? For example, you could use Niko's ability to exile a manifested card, and then at the end of your turn when it returns from exile, it will be the creature that was underneath. It is important to notice that if you use Niko's ability, the shards do become 2/2 manifestations, as the card text states become a copy of that creature, and the one exile that created that is the manifestation. However, you could use a different blink effect to make it the underlying manifested creature first, and then use Niko's ability, and then you might have just saved a whole bunch on mana cost, who knows. Regardless of how you build your deck, I would recommend putting in a bunch of big beatdown beasties. I do feel like there's a few no-brainers that we should include in just about every Niko deck. To start, let's always include Soul Herder if we can, because this is just a whole bunch of value. From its trigger to its counters, it is good for you all the way around. It also combos around the Dowerport Mage. I know we mentioned this earlier, but this is definitely a superb choice. We can't forget the Niko Planeswalker that just accelerates this entire plan to 11. And even with all the blink spells I put in, I found myself running out of them in certain situations, so while this one's a bit more fringe and you don't necessarily need, I love Shipwreck Dowser because it keeps giving me back my cheap blink spells that keep Niko safe and make more of my tokens. And before we wrap this up, I would like to give a little bit of a gameplay tip. If you're playing this deck or a deck that's similar to this one, I would always recommend playing defensively. I know I said that earlier in the video as well, but I can't stress how important it is. Niko is the linchpin of this deck, and if Niko is going to die or constantly move to the command zone in some other fashion, you're gonna have a bad time, okay? But if you're able to save some mana and use your instant blink spells in order to save Niko's ass whenever you need to, you can become the powerhouse that you've always been destined to be. So please have fun and build this deck, but don't build it as a tier 2. I don't think it's possible. Niko is just far too strong. I mean, I suppose you could use non-blink spells and just have a very underwhelming deck, which could be a tier 2, but that doesn't sound like very much fun to pilot. However, I did want to say thank you to everyone who I've noticed subscribe and like the most recent videos. The support means a lot. Please keep it up, and if you have any comments, let me know below. But as for now, this has been Sand for Days. I'm Course, and I get everywhere. Bye-bye now.